My son and my older brother were sitting at my kitchen table, in my house, eating my food, drinking my coffee, when Daniel looked straight at me and said, "Mom, we think it's time to talk about your future." His uncle nodded along like he had any business nodding about anything under my roof. I looked at both of them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I reached into my purse and set two white envelopes on the table. One had Daniel written on the front. The other had Frank. "Good," I said, "because so do I." Those envelopes were eviction notices, and by the end of that same week, both of them were gone. My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I let love make me feel invisible inside my own home, and exactly what I did to take it back. If you clicked on this because you have ever let someone move into your home just to help them, just for a little while, and then watch them slowly start acting like the place was theirs, stay right here, because I'm going to tell you everything. This house is the thing Robert and I built together. 32 years of marriage, 2 refinances, 1 roof that cost us more than we want to remember, more dinners at that kitchen table than I could ever count. When Robert passed, he left this house to me. Not to Daniel, not to Frank, to me. But somewhere over 14 months, I started feeling like a visitor in my own home. I started second-guessing myself in my own kitchen, and the morning I walked out back and found Frank using Robert's old workshop as his own personal storage unit, without asking, without saying a single word, that was the morning I realized exactly how far things had gone. To understand what was in those 2 envelopes, you need to understand how it all started, because I promise you, it didn't happen all at once. It never does. Robert passed 5 years ago. It was lung disease, the slow kind that moves fast right at the end. He was 71. He had lived a full life, but knowing that doesn't make the quiet any easier. When you spend 32 years sleeping beside the same person, the space they leave behind has a sound all its own. Robert was a practical man. Not cold. Lord, no. He was one of the warmest people I have ever known, but practical in the way that people who grow up without much tend to be. He believed in doing things right the first time and not making the same mistake twice. He paid off this house 18 years before he died. He kept every document filed, every account clearly labeled. He knew exactly what he had and exactly where it was. A few months before we lost him, when he knew things were getting serious, he sat me down right there at the kitchen table. His hands were folded on top of the table the way they always were when he had something important to say. "Margie," he said. He always called me Margie. "This house is yours when I'm gone. Not Daniel's, not anyone else's. Yours. Don't let guilt talk you into something you don't actually want." I told him I didn't quite know what he meant by that. He smiled in that quiet way of his, like he knew I was pretending. "You give too much of yourself," he said. "I've always loved that about you, but it can be used against you. Just promise me you'll hold on to what's yours." I promised. And like most promises made in that kind of moment, I truly believed I would never have to keep it. After Robert passed, Daniel showed up for me. He really did. He drove me to appointments. He helped me go through Robert's things, which was the hardest job I have ever done. He came by on weekends just to check in, just to make sure I was okay. He was 31 then, working a decent job in sales, and for about 2 years after the funeral, things between us were steady and good. But life has a way of shifting when you're not paying attention.
Here is the thing I keep coming back to. I keep asking myself, when exactly did helping my son become losing my home? There is no single moment I can name. It was more like 100 small moments, each one reasonable enough on its own, and I just kept walking right past all of them. Let me ask you something before I go on. Have you ever helped someone so much that they stopped feeling grateful and started feeling entitled? Hold on to your answer. I want you to come back to it at the end of this story. It started about 2.5 years ago. Daniel called on a Sunday evening. Not a visit, just a phone call, which already felt a little off. He told me things had gotten hard. He had been laid off 3 months earlier and hadn't said a word to me about it. He'd been burning through his savings. His girlfriend had left. He was 2 months behind on rent. "Mum, I just need a few months, just until I get back on my feet." What was I supposed to say? He was my son. This was the house he grew up in. I said, "Of course, come home." The first month was good. He was up early, dressed, job hunting on his laptop. He helped with the yard. He was real company at dinner. I thought, this is going to be fine. The second month, things started to slow. He was up later. The job applications turned into, "I'm waiting to hear back." The help around the house became me doing most of it while he sat in the living room watching TV. By the third month, his apartment apartment lease had run out, he moved his furniture into my garage without really asking, just said, "I need to put this somewhere, Mom," and started carrying boxes in. And I realized that the few months had become something with no end date at all, just an open door that I had left open. I said nothing because he was my son, and I kept telling myself, any week now, he'll get back on his feet. Then one afternoon, my phone rang, and it was Frank. I need to tell you something about my brother Frank before I go any further, because what I'm about to say might make you picture him as a simple villain, and the truth is a little more complicated, and that complicated truth is actually harder to deal with than a clean villain would be. Frank is 71, 4 years older than me, and he has never once in his adult life been good with money. Not cruel, not a bad person really, just careless in a way that never seemed to cost him much because there was always someone around willing to catch him. He's been married twice and divorced twice. He's spent his whole life moving from one place to the next, always finding a soft landing. When we were kids, our mother used to say Frank had the gift of always landing on his feet. What she really meant was that he had the gift of finding other people's feet to land on. Frank told me he'd had a situation with his living arrangement. He and Daniel had been talking, and I didn't even know they'd stayed in regular contact. He needed somewhere to stay. Just for a little while, Margie. You know I wouldn't ask if I had any other option. I should have asked more questions. I should have said let me think about it and called him back. Instead I said yes, because he was my brother, because I had the space, because saying yes is what I have always done. 2 days later, Frank pulled into my driveway with a truck. Not a car, a truck, loaded with boxes and furniture, and what looked like an entire bedroom set. He spent 4 hours that first day unloading things. Into the spare room I had offered, yes, but also into my garage and into Robert's old workshop out back. Using Robert's space without a single word to me, like it was already settled, like he had already decided this was home. By the first weekend, the two of them were settled in like they had always been there. Daniel on the couch, Frank in Robert's chair reading the paper, and me standing in my own kitchen feeling like I had wandered into someone else's house. But here is the thing. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't find out until a few months later, changed everything. And when I heard it, it wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. Stay with me.
Let me tell you about a Tuesday morning about 8 months in, because that was the morning everything shifted. Not with shouting, not with a big dramatic scene. The worst things always happen quietly. I woke up early, like I always do, came downstairs to make coffee, and before I even got to the kitchen, I heard voices. Daniel and Frank, already up, talking low at the table. Something about the way they sounded, not laughing, not talking about nothing, made me slow down in the hallway. Frank said, "She's not going to like it." Daniel, "She doesn't have to like it, she just has to see that it makes sense. You know how she is, she's stubborn." I know, but this house is too big for one person, and she's not getting any younger. I stood in that hallway, in my own house, and I listened to my son and my brother talk about what to do with me, like I was a piece of furniture they hadn't figured out where to put. I walked in. They both looked up fast, the kind of fast that tells you they knew exactly what had just happened. "Good morning," I said. I poured my coffee. I sat down. "What were you two talking about?" Frank cleared his throat. "Just having a conversation, Margie." "About me," I said. "Not a question." Daniel looked at his hands. "We're just worried about you, Mom. This house is a lot to manage alone. I have been managing it just fine for 5 years." "You're working too hard," Frank said. "A woman on her own in a house this size?" "I'm 67, Frank, not 97. That's when Daniel put a folder on the table and slid it toward me. I opened it and found brochures. Retirement communities, 3 of them, with little pictures of smiling white-haired women sitting in sunny dining rooms. Price sheets, floor plans, everything neatly printed out. "We did some research," Daniel said quietly. I sat there looking at those pages for a long moment, and something in me, something that had been bending and bending for 8 months, went completely still. "You want me to leave," I said. "We want you to be comfortable," Frank said. "I am comfortable," I said. "In my own home?" Daniel leaned forward. "Mom, Realistically, I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. This is my house. Robert left it to me, and I'm not going anywhere. I stood up. I picked up my coffee. I walked out of that kitchen. Behind me, I heard Frank say something low to Daniel. I didn't stop. I didn't need to hear it. That same afternoon, I called my attorney. I had worked with Carol for 11 years. She handled Robert's estate after he passed. She was the kind of woman who got straight to the point and never wasted a single word. I sat across from her desk and told her everything. How Daniel had moved in, how Frank had shown up with a truck, how 8 months had gone by, how I had found brochures for retirement homes on my own kitchen table. She listened to all of it without interrupting once. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" "I want them both out. Daniel is your son." I know who Daniel is. And Frank, is there anything in writing? Any kind of rental agreement? Nothing. He just moved in. She nodded slowly. "All right, here's where you stand." She walked me through the whole thing, what the law required, what I was entitled to do, what proper notice looked like. It was more complicated than I had hoped and simpler than I had feared. For Daniel, 30 days, she said. For Frank, since there's no agreement, 14. I sat there and thought about Robert, about what he had said to me at that table. "Don't let guilt talk you into something you don't want." "She's not getting any younger," Daniel had said, as if my age was the problem, as if loving people who use that love against you was the problem. "How fast can you have the notices ready?" I asked. Carol looked at me over her glasses. Thursday morning.
I drove home with the windows down even though the air was cold because I needed to feel something on my face. When I pulled into my driveway, I could see the light on in Robert's workshop. Frank, in there again, moving things around like it was already his. I sat in the car. I let myself feel all of it, the sadness, the anger, and that deep, quiet hurt of being made to feel like a guest in the one place in the world that was supposed to be yours. Then I went inside. I made dinner. I kept both envelopes in my purse for 3 days, waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a Saturday morning. This is the part I told you about at the very beginning. The kitchen table, the 2 envelopes. Stay right here, because this is where everything turned. Saturday morning I came downstairs and they were already there. Daniel with his coffee, Frank sitting in Robert's chair, reading the paper like he owned it, like he had always owned it. The 2 of them so comfortable in my home that they had stopped seeing me in it at all. Daniel looked up and jumped right in. "Mum, we really do need to talk about the house." "Yes," I said, "we do." I pulled out the chair across from them and I sat down. Then I reached into my purse and set both envelopes on the table, one for Daniel, one for Frank, right there between the coffee cups. That's actually why I had these prepared. Frank picked his up first. He opened it, read the first 2 lines, set it down very slowly. "Margie, what is this?" "It's a notice to vacate," I said. "You have 14 days, Frank." He stared at me like I had started speaking a different language. "You're serious?" "I am always serious." Daniel hadn't touched his. He was just looking at me. "Mum, go ahead and open it, Daniel." He picked it up. He read it. His face went through 4 different things in about 10 seconds. 30 days, he said. "Yes, you're evicting me from your house. I'm asking you to leave. The paper just makes it official because of a folder of brochures, because of one conversation." And here is where I said the thing I had been holding inside for 8 months. I looked right at my son and I said, "Daniel, this is not about one conversation. This is about 8 months of watching you make yourself at home inside my grief. You moved in, you stopped looking for work, you brought your uncle here without asking me, and then you sat at my table and looked at floor plans for where I should go, so that the 2 of you could stay." He opened his mouth. "I'm not finished." I had not raised my voice one single time. "Your father spent 30 years making sure I would never have to ask anyone for anything. He left me this house because he trusted me with it, and you spent 8 months slowly trying to take it from me. I am done," Frank said. "Margie, you're being dramatic." "Frank," I turned to him, "you used Robert's workshop without asking. You moved furniture into my garage without asking. You have lived here for 8 months without paying 1 dime, and you sat at this table and called me stubborn because I didn't want to leave my own home." I looked at him steadily. "You do not get to call me dramatic." The kitchen went completely quiet. Then Daniel said, quietly, almost like a kid again, "Where am I supposed to go?" "That," I said, "is the exact question you should have been asking yourself 8 months ago." I stood up. I picked up my coffee cup. Carol's number is at the bottom of both pages if you have questions. And I walked out of my own kitchen with my back straight and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my hands. But I did not stop, and I did not look back once. Frank left on day 11. He didn't knock on my door, didn't leave a note. He backed his truck up to the garage, loaded everything he had unloaded 8 months before, and drove out of the driveway without a single word. I watched from the upstairs window. I won't pretend that didn't hurt. He is my brother. We grew up in the same house, went to the same schools, sat at the same table for years. But he had looked me in the face and called me dramatic for wanting to stay in my own home, and I couldn't make myself forget that. Daniel was harder. He always would be. 2 days after I gave him the envelope, he knocked on my bedroom door. I opened it, and he was standing there, looking like he hadn't slept since Saturday. "Can we talk, Mom?" "Yes," I said. "We can." We sat in the living room, not the kitchen. I needed the room to feel different. He talked for a long time. He told me he was sorry for not telling me about the layoff sooner, sorry for not looking harder for work. He said somewhere along the way he had just stopped trying, that it had been easier to stay, easier to let my home fill in for the life he wasn't building. And then he said the thing that broke me wide open. "After Dad died, I just didn't want to be alone," he said. His voice cracked right down the middle. "Coming here felt like the closest thing to having him back, and I'm sorry I turned that into something that hurt you. I didn't mean for it to go where it went, but that doesn't make it okay." Part of me, the part that will always be his mother, wanted to reach over and tell him none of it mattered. But I had stood in a hallway and heard him say she just has to see it makes sense. So instead I said, "You hurt me, Daniel, not just with the brochures, with all of it, with making me feel like I was in the way inside my own home. I know, your father trusted me with this house, and you sat at his table and talked about moving me out of it. I know, Mom." His eyes were wet. "I'm ashamed of that. I really am." We sat quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is there anything I can do to make it right?" "Get a job," I said. "Get your own place. Build a life that belongs to you. That is what I want for you. Not because I don't love you, but because I do. You've been hiding in my grief for over a year, and that's not good for you, and it's not good for me." He moved out on day 28, 2 days before the deadline. He found a room renting from a friend, and within a week he had a temporary job lined up. He called me the afternoon he moved in. "I'm in," he said. "How does it feel?" I asked. He went quiet for just a second, like I should have done this a long time ago. "Yes," I said. "It does." Daniel came for Sunday dinner about 3 weeks after he moved out. He brought flowers, just the grocery store kind, nothing fancy, which honestly meant more to me than something expensive would have. He helped me set the table. We ate and we talked, and we laughed at something dumb on TV. And for the first time in over a year, my kitchen felt like mine again. He has been coming back most Sundays since, not every week. He has his own life now, which is entirely the point. He got a real job 2 months ago. He is saving money. He sounds like himself. He sounds like the son I raised. Frank and I haven't spoken. I sent him a card at Christmas and left the door open. Nothing came back. That one sits heavier than I expected. I will not pretend otherwise. But I also know that when a man looks at his younger sister and calls her dramatic for refusing to leave her own home, he is telling you something true about how he sees you. I can love my brother. I don't have to share a roof with that truth. Robert's chair is still in the corner of the living room. I sit in it some evenings with a cup of tea when the house is quiet, and I talk to him, which I know might sound strange, but I passed the age of caring what sounds strange a long time ago. I tell him about Daniel, about Frank, about the envelopes, about that Saturday morning at the kitchen table. I like to think he would have gotten a real kick out of the envelopes. Here is what I know now that I did not fully understand before all of this happened. Love is not the same thing as unlimited access. You can love someone completely, your child, your sibling, the people you have known your whole life, and still protect the life you have built. In fact, sometimes protecting what you have built is the most loving thing you can do. Because when you let someone take over your space, your routine, your sense of home, you are not helping them build their life. You are letting them borrow yours instead. And borrowing a life is not the same as living one, Robert used to say. And I can hear his voice clear as day when I think about it. Margie, a house is just walls and a roof. Home is something you choose to make. I understood him when he said it. I understand him even more now. I made this home on purpose, with 32 years of my life in it. And when the time came, I protected it on purpose too. So if you are watching this right now, and someone in your life has slowly settled into your space, your house, your time, your quiet, I want you to hear this one thing clearly. You are allowed to ask for it back. You do not have to shout. You do not have to be mean about it. You just have to be honest and clear. Clarity is not cruelty. It only feels that way to people who were counting on your silence to stay comfortable. I am Margaret. I am 67 years old. I changed no locks. I raised no voice. I just put 2 envelopes on my kitchen table on a Saturday morning. And I got my home back. If this story touched you, if you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, tell me in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if you believe that loving someone does not have to mean losing yourself in the process, subscribe and stay with me, because I have more stories exactly like this one, and I am just getting started.